Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and this is the summary for the day of 1386 for the 10th of December. We're going to start off from the north, from the Sumi front, because we haven't done it in a long time. So, reason enough. So over at the Sumi front, we have continued unusual situation up here in the Sumi front. Fighting continued to be reported over in this western flank of the Sumi front. There is Kusherivka, I believe, Kusherivka, Bunyakine, as well as this place called Rizivka. So these three places continue, this side of the things, this side of the front line continue to have fighting reported. This is extremely unusual. I mean, Rizivka maybe is still alright, but no, this other two is really unusual. So this is something that we should keep a lookout for. Unusual situation is what the SITREP, one of the big reasons why SITREP is important, because we are monitoring the trends of the fighting reports. So that's all from that sector. We'll keep a lookout, but in the main frontline region, we still have fighting reported at Andrievka, Oleksievka, and Novosibirsk. This is, however, a static line. I don't expect too much from this sector. There is also no indications whatsoever about the Russians going to go for a big Sumy offensive, which is why the unusual situation shouldn't be too much of a big thing, but definitely we need to keep a lookout for that. If the Russians make a push for Kiev again, yeah, then this direction would be one of those areas. But clearly they will have to go from other directions, like into the Chernihiv region and also through the Chernobyl region. So, but tentatively, I don't think they're going to go for all these places. But I also suspect these areas might be a bit under defended right now because the other front lines are all rather desperate. Over in the Kharkiv front, we have shelling reported at this place called Pokova Mikidivka, which is very unusual. Some shelling in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, more unusual stuff. So unusual things, definitely we need to keep a lookout for. Over in the Voschan sector of the Kharkiv front, we have fighting reported over continuing at Ibitske, Staritsia, Sininikove, Vilsha, Voschansk, as well as Voschansky Kotori. Generally, most of these are pretty routine. Voschansky Kotori is a bit more less common nowadays. So the battle for Voschansk probably is still ongoing, maybe because the Russians are unable to hold the positions in these very difficult to hold positions, which allows the Ukrainians to continue to sneak in, and that's probably why there is still fighting being reported in Voschansk. Vilsha situation, there is no more updates since. Ukrainians may still be holding the southern part of Vilsha, and there is also a case where the Russians may not be holding actual grounds within Vilsha, or maybe a little bit. We're not sure. So that's the battles for Vilsha. Sininikove is probably where the Russian HQ is, and this is where they launch attacks into Liman. And the Ukrainians may be operating from Simonivka, and that's where the battle should be. But the fact that the fighting is not reported at Liman might suggest that the Ukrainians may have stick back towards Sininikove areas, so that is possible. So for those that do not understand why I report quite differently, or you probably never watched DPA before, this new idea is of this understanding the front line. There's this new idea, this new model that I'm using. It is to understand where is the operating HQ, where is the forward operating base, because the soldiers need to sleep. The soldiers need to have a headquarters, and from that headquarters, even if it's a small one, a company headquarter, a platoon headquarter, is still a headquarter. It's still a forward operating base. That's where the soldiers are dispatched to do their operations, and it is these areas that is the one that we need to keep a lookout for, because there's a maximum range to how far you can walk. It does not necessarily mean that there is vehicles all the time. Most of the time in today's warfare, due to FPV drone strikes, the usage of vehicles is pretty much reduced. So they are all reserved for quick deployment or fire support role. Very, very seldom now is used for assault. So usually the infantry walk. So, and how far can you walk before it becomes stupid? I would say it can't possibly be more than 10 kilometers. 10 kilometers is already very far. So that would be like a 3 hour walk. No, if you're fast, maybe 2 hours. So I would say, yeah, I mean, with gear and ammo and guns and and keep a lookout for drones and whatnot. I know maybe you run naked and you can run very fast. Like 1 hour you can take 10 kilometers. Good for you. When I drive a car, I can do 60. Take that. You lose. So anyway, Stadisia direction, this push towards Ibiske seems to be ongoing. Tentatively, no more news regarding that. So that's all from this sector. So moving on to the next front line is over in the Vorechna front. This is Vorechna. At the Vorechna front, we have over in the northern flank, there's not much here. So there's fighting reported at Obihivka, Vorichanske, as well as Krukivka. So tentatively, not much things. Russian bases is at Vorechna, Kanyamka. There's probably one at Bolohivka, Odradne, and they may not be at Vorichanske. The Ukrainians is at Koloziazny. So despite the Russians have captured Vorichanske, they may not actually have a HQ in that position, because when you're very close to the enemy base, that is like 5 kilometers away. The whole of Vorichanske is just a freaking kill zone for FPV drones flying out of Koloziazny. So this is the reason why we need to understand where are the bases. So of course, these are all conjectures. These are all what I think it might be. You may have your own version of where you think the HQ might be, but the HQ is where the drones flies out. So anything within 5 kilometers of this base is super dangerous. This base will control the entire war space around here. And how do you defeat this? Airstrikes, TOS strikes, fire supports, artillery, missile strikes, until the entire base become inoperable. Most of the soldiers died, the equipments are destroyed, they need to, or they ran off men, or they just freaked out, and then they leave the position. Then that's when the Russians can then attack and take Koloziazny. That's how it works. So so when the Ukrainians still have a strong position at Koloziazny, it's really hard for the Russians to actually control Vorichanske. That is the reason why. So this is the new model, the new DPA way of looking at the front line. I have been looking at this for some time already. If you follow me very closely, you probably have felt hints of this, because this thing has been in my mind for a while. So and it's only like recently things suddenly connected for me in the brain, so I'm able to now report it in a totally different way. So the Ukrainians are probably at opposite Obokivka. The Ukrainians are also at Krukivka. Probably not at Krukivka, but they may be like in somewhere further. But anyway, Ukrainian defensive position at Krukivka is not like a surprising thing. So the battle pushing out of Krukivka is difficult, because the front line here, the terrain is just a difficult terrain. So nothing special. So this is pretty routine. So you go on to the Kupiansk front. At the Kupiansk front, fighting is reported over at Petropavlivka, Kupiansk-Vezlovi, Kurilevka, and Kisharivka. I just want to say, the western part of Kupiansk may be entirely taken back by the Ukrainian forces. Might be entirely taken back. So this is just an early warning. So for those pro-Russian guys that is watching, prepare for emotional damage, because I think Putin will have to eat his words. Because he over committed about this. Oh, Kupiansk has been captured for weeks already, kind of narrative. And yeah, so it is what it is. But the Russians' position in the eastern Kupiansk may be actually more than what we see here, and this is where they launched the attacks. But anyway, the Russians' aim is to take Kupiansk, Vezlovi, and take out these two salient. So that's the main aim right here. There is a river here, and this river is pretty famous now. Is the Oskil River. So anyway, that's it for this sector here. Pretty routine, generally speaking. We go on to the Borova front. At the Borova front, there's nothing over in the northern flank, which is a surprise. Fighting is reported in Novoyehorivka and Cheniskina. But this is to me a static line. I don't expect too much from this sector. We move further south, which is the Oskil front. So this is the Oskil front. So at Oskil, we have fighting reported at Kharkivka, Oleksandrivka, Novoselivka, Yarova, with Russian forces appearing inside of Yarova. Fighting is reported at Drobesheve, Stavki, and Zarishny. The Russians may have a HQ over in Novoselivka. This might be the new forward operating base, which allows the Russians to actually attack Oleksandrivka and Yarova from. This is where they come from. The Ukrainians actually have a position at Drobesheve, at Sviatohursk, and probably at Oleksandrivka and maybe around Sosnove as well. So the Ukrainians do have a lot of defensive position, not to mention the forest, which it's pretty hard to tell where they might be. So the Ukrainians can basically launch counterattacks. They are not at Yarova though. I don't think the Ukrainians have a position in Yarova. Maybe some soldiers have to sit there as cannon fodders. But generally, this is the reason why the front line hardly moved. This front line is very static. Despite a lot of fighting being reported, it's very clear that the Russians want Yarova, then go to Sviatohursk. But this operation I have mentioned for months, and they still can't accomplish it. The main reason, as I said, the Ukrainians have a lot of good defensive position, which also translate to operating bases, which means that they can counterattack from that position and render a lot of the Russian capture unholdable. Stavki situation is probably the same. The Russians probably is not at Stavki. The Russians is probably at Kolozyazy, and that's where they launch attacks into Stavki region. The aim is to take out the salient, but so far no success, because Liman is just nearby. If you're going to pull up a bit, you're going to see Liman, and from Liman is clearly a major base for the Ukrainians, and from Liman they can launch multiple big operations to block the Russian forces, which caused the whole front line here to be paralyzed. So this is the main reason. You can see why it's pretty useful, the new model. And unfortunately, I will be repeating this for quite a number of SITREPs because the viewership is pretty low for SITREP. So I think a lot of people may not have catch it, so I have to repeat myself quite a number of times. So anyway, that's Liman, but it's good. It's also good for those regulars because it's reinforcement. It helps you to see the Ukraine war in a very different light. And I think what it will do is that it balances the view of the Ukrainian, the perception of the Ukrainians to become a lot more positive. Even you may be pro-Russian, but you must understand that Ukrainian forces, they are not inferior, generally speaking, because Russians and Ukrainians are the same people. They are both from the Soviet Union. They have very similar mindsets. The only difference is the weaponry is different, the motivation is different, the weaponry is different, and the amount of logistics and support elements is different. The Russians clearly have the advantage, but the Ukrainians have drones technology as well, and so just having FPV drones alone is going to make offensive operations just so difficult. You can't hold positions. So unless you have a strong fortified position, going into a totally flattened village is a suicide. So that's important to note. Russian forces entered into Dubrova in the Siversk front as they've gone through the forest south of Liman and starting the battle for Dubrova. Fighting is reported in Yampil. In Siversk, the battle for Siversk is ongoing. The situation is pretty hopeless for the Ukrainians. I don't think the Ukrainians have any HQ there. The HQ must have been already redeployed, probably to Kalenki. Fighting is reported as Sviatoporodsk, which makes perfect sense. So I'm quite sure the Russians already made civils of operating base by now, at least the eastern part. And from this position, the Russians can then launch effective attacks into Platonivka, Dronivka, Zakhidny. They will be able to support the operations around here, because despite what the map shows capture, I don't think the Russians actually send cannon folders to sit there. That is the important thing to note. I think the Russians continued, they return back to Serebryanka as their base, and they continued, then they launch attacks, towards Zakhine direction, which is also the reason why they can't go too far and the front line got stuck, is this. So until the military come up with a new way to create HQs, fortified defendable HQs, it's going to be pretty difficult. So anyway, Svetoporovsky is probably going in the direction towards Kalenki, which is where the Ukrainians are holding their HQ. But the battle will be difficult because it will be supported by Kalenki, and right Oleksandrivka is the major HQ, which is where they will reinforce, and from here you have Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. So yeah, the battles moving west is going to get more and more difficult. So for the Russian supporters and the Russians, do put this into considerations. So that's all from the civils front. Over in the Bakhmut front, mention of Minkiivka, not important. Over in the Konstantinivka front. So this is Konstantinivka. Fighting is reported over in Konstantinivka as usual. There is shelling reported at Ilinivka. Alexander Shutine is mentioned. The Russian claimed the full capture of Plishievka according to the Rybas mapping pro-Russian source. Fighting is reported at Yablonivka and Rusinya. This area here, I think, is a static line. The push moving towards Bereztok doesn't seem to be happening. I think because the Ukrainian position in Konstantinivka is just too strong. Ukrainians can do very strong counterattacks or drone attacks on Russian forces trying to go for Bereztok. If you cannot get close, then you cannot capture it. And even if you have captured it, sitting there means certain death. So until Konstantinivka can be seriously weakened, I think this entire area is stuck. Konstantinivka will be the fortress city right now for this sector of the front line. So that's all from the Konstantinivka front. The rest is the usual. The Russians are trying to go towards Konstantinivka, but it's the same problem. They just cannot catch a break. So moving on to the to the Pokrov front. This is Pokrov. In the northern flank of the Pokrov front, so we have fighting reported at Sofievka, shelling is reported at Toske, Kusherivka is mentioned, Vilny, Noveshakove, Ivanivka, Nikanorivka, Novi Donbass, Bilitsky, Suketsky, Razine, Novoekonomichny, Shubny Liman, Rodinsky, Shevchenko, and shelling is reported at Tropopilia. A lot of arrows. This is insane. This is a porcupine. The main thing is seemingly that the Russians may be doing some kind of a major push in the direction of Dobropilia, which is going to likely become the new name of the front line. And I think the Ukrainians are putting up a strong fight. They are defending as much as they can and counter-attacking, which is probably why we have so many places mentioned, including the rear positions. So this is a very complicated situation, and I think there's overlapping troops positions between the two sides. So I think tentatively we just understand this as a major contested zone for now, and with age. With one side of your brain thinking that no, there is a current major push for the Dobropilia direction, not necessarily the Dobropilia, but the Russians are pushing towards Dobropilia. So that's the current situation in the northern flank of the Pokrov front. Over in the Pokrov Minograd zone, so as mentioned just now, Rodinsky, Shubny Liman, Novoekonomichny, fighting is reported at Krishine, Vivrove, Kotline. Battles is within Pokrov. Where exactly, not very clear. It's probably in the northern part. because the northern part, probably the Ukrainians continue to sneak in and trying to counterattack. There's a possibility. However, the encirclement is probably on. The Russians are attacking Svitley, and the Russian Defense Ministry is saying that they are doing clearing operations at Hryshine. Very interesting. And also at Svitley. The Russians also have claimed a big chunk of Minograd, with claiming the entire eastern part has fallen. However, there's a geolocation, actually this is the wrong color, of Ukrainians are getting airstrike in this position, which put into question about some of the Russian claims in this region. Maybe the Ukrainians still have a much bigger position, and the HQ is right in the center of Minograd, which is where they launch counterattacks. But of course, they cannot add in more men because it's encirclement. So there will be a limit to how long they can last. Geolocation of Russian forces thus shows that the Russians have advanced in the south of Minograd, and the encirclement is getting tighter and tighter. And the Ukrainian mapping also have considered everything south of the everything in the southernmost part of Minograd, as well as south of the railway line between Pokrov and Minograd. So situation is definitely bad. The main push is coming from the south and from the east. Russian Defense Ministry also say that it's coming from the west. So depending on what you want to think, the Rodinsky and Shevri Liman, the main idea is to do a flanking operation around, but the Ukrainians seems to have trapped them in this position. This front line is not moving. Don't understand the Novoekonomichny. So clearing operation at Hryshine, very big claim. So let's see, if that is a main push. Otherwise, this is still a encirclement. Ukrainian claims Vivrove and Kotline is fighting. Maybe the Ukrainians have sneaked back. Probable is it? I mean, it's not impossible, but it's pretty suicidal because this is pretty important lines for the Russians. They will be defending. Let's see how this goes. So that's all from the Pokrov front. We're going to go on to the northern flank of the Dnipro front. So this is the northern flank of the Dnipro front. We have fighting. Let me see. I need to zoom out. Sorry, forgot to zoom out. Fighting is reported at Zeleny High, Filia, Novopalevka, Novomykolaivka, Molodetsky. Russian forces entered into Novopihorodny. Fighting is Udashny and Kotline, as already mentioned. Generally, this is a static line. However, the push towards Novopihorodny is going to be interesting to watch. Novomykolaivka is going to be static for now. Ukrainian major base is at Mizova, most likely. This is where they are putting pressure. The Russians may have established a forward operating base over in Udashny, which allows them to launch this attack. Previously, I think they don't have a base at Udashny because they haven't fully secured it. And I think now they have established a base after clearing the northern part of Udashny, which now allows them to attack into Novopihorodny. I think that is the sequence of events why this is currently happening. The battle for Novopalevka, no news, so no situation in Filia also is a question mark. And the Ukrainians continue to have a position seemingly over in Zeleny High, which fighting is being reported over there. The main problem for the Russians right here is I don't think they have a base nearby. The closest is probably Dashny, or maybe at Horikove, which doesn't look like a place that you can really base from. And even from Horikove, this is like 9 kilometers. I mean, this is a bit far to walk because that's a straight line. If you walk there, it's going to be like 15 kilometers. That is a bit far, and you're going to be spending like 3-4 hours exposed to drone attacks. So this is not ideal, which is also why motorcycle assaults is now a thing in this new warfare. So now you understand why motorcycles exist now for this new type of warfare, because the distance they need to cover from their base to the front line is now much further due to the drones. In World War II, or maybe even in the in the Cambodian-Thailand warfare, Cambodian-Thailand war right now, it's still very World War II-ish, still the previous type of war where infantries are facing each other. So in this kind of warfare, it makes sense to capture grounds, with your soldiers, because you're always fighting this very close quarter kind of combat. But when drones start to become proliferated, tentatively, that's not entirely the case for the Thailand Cambodian side. But like the Ukraine war side, when drones is like artillery shells, is abundant, then infantry will be very, very soft targets. They will have to stay away from the front line, and that results in the current Ukraine war, where you may never ever see an enemy soldier ever in your entire stint as a soldier. Until the moment you die, you also probably may never see a enemy soldier. That's the reality of the Ukraine war. So moving on to the southern flank of the Dnipro front. So we have fighting reported over in Voronezh, Sosnivka, Stepove, Verbove, Vishneve, Yehorevka, and as well as Ternovate. So the situation right here, in my opinion, is more towards the favor of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have a lot of very strong positions around here. They have Veliko Mihailivka, they have Oleksandrivka, Porotsky, and this allows them to conduct, and of course the forest at Lisne. This allows them to continue to conduct operations deep into the so-called Russian controlled territory. And the latest, of course, in yesterday's report, we have the Ukrainians attacking all the way to Verbove, Stepove, which is a big surprise. That the Ukrainians is able to attack like this. So this just shows the problem with the Russians in this sector. They may not have a very strong base in the area here. I would imagine they will want to base it at Verbove, and there might be another one over in the Yehorevka Vishneve region, but these areas here are all getting attacked. So and the Russian position in this place called Otospiske, I don't think the Russians are here at all. Like, this was just a flag raising operation. I don't think they have a defensive position right there. The Ukrainians can easily counterattack and take this position, which is why the fighting is back at Yehorevka. There's a possibility. A push towards Ternovate, this could be just a shelling report. This may not be an operation of like a main push. So tentatively, the situation is actually, in my opinion, the Ukrainians are actually on the counter. But the front line is, of course, still static. I think, but what I want to say is that this northern area here, there may be no Ukrainian forces there, but they may not be also Russian soldiers there. That the Russians may not have a position there as well. So these are all so-called gray zones where no one is there. So no man's land. So that could be the case. But anyway, we shall continue to monitor the situation. So let's see how this continues to play out. We go on to the Huepole sector. In the Huepole sector, Ternovate, as already mentioned just now, there's COVID-19. Fighting is reported over at Krasnoherske, Rybne, Solodke, Uspenivka, Bavarivka, Zelene, Huepole, and shelling is reported at Herke. And so there's a geolocation of a Russian airstrike in Huepole, clearly because the Ukrainians, especially on the western side of the city, is a major HQ. This is a major HQ, which is why it is attracting airstrikes to weaken the HQ, to force the Ukrainians to retreat. A push towards Vavarivka and Zelene is sensible. The Russians need to cut off any supply lines from here, but I think the Ukrainians have Vodvizivka as a HQ, which allows them to counterattack back in this sector here. Rizhivzyanka, sorry, how do you pronounce this? Rizhivzyanka is also, I believe, it's a base, and this is where they are holding the positions here. There is definitely Ukrainian defensive positions around here because that's what the Ukrainians like to do, and the Russians need to shell the hell out of this place first. And I think those are not attacks; those are just shelling. Ukrainians may actually have Zaporizhia, which is where they are launching counterattacks and resupply or rotations into this sector, which the Russians may not actually have a strong position with. The Russians HQ, yeah, probably no Petrovka, Melanivka, maybe Novokhrihorivka, maybe. This sector here, this junction here should be a HQ. I'm not sure, but the Ukrainians seems to be coming back, and then we are having fighting being reported here according to the Ukrainians. So this area here, for the Russians, they have to take out and secure. Means they need to put out cannon folders to defend. Let's see how that goes. Battle for Huayapoli is ongoing. The Russians are pushing in from the northeast, but let's see how this goes. So that's all from this Huayapoli sector. Over in the rest of the Zaporizhia front, in the Kayamsky and Orikhiv sector, fighting is reported at Malotomashka, Novoandrievka, shelling is reported at Preobrazhenka, Shemenivka, there's fighting, Stepove is fighting, Stepnohurst, and Primorsky. So what is significant is the return of Stepove, Stepnohurst, and Primorsky. This push is back. The Russians push along the Dnieper River is back as expected. There is the Stepove and Shabaki, fighting is probably diversionary. I think they want to, distract the Ukrainians away from the main push, which is along the river. The push towards Novoandrievka and Malotomashka might be a distraction as well, to pretend that they're going for Orikhiv, so to draw Ukrainian attention away as well towards the Orikhiv direction. But tentatively, that's all we have for here. Nothing very significant for now. And before I go on to the last report, happy birthday to you. If your birthday today, press the like button, subscribe, and we go on to the last front line, the Kherson front. At the Kherson front, we have shelling reported at Tamarini and Pontantivka. Not important. And over in the Antonovsky Bridge, the Russians allegedly still attacking the Antonovsky Bridge, which the Ukrainians maybe is holding, but tentatively not much new updates regarding that. Then the information is coming from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So that's it. So thank you for watching. Happy birthday to the birthday boy or girl today. And of course, press the like button. Subscribe is the most important thing. Subscribe. If you are not subscribed, even if you think you're subscribed, check. Because YouTube every single day unsubscribe people from the channel is ridiculous. It is possible that people unsubscribe because they don't like certain things that I say. But it's ridiculous that people got unsubscribed even when I don't post videos. So check. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next update.